All right, it's time for Yogi and the Beach Man. Hi, I'm Jim the Yogi.
And I'm Rick Beach, the Beach Man.
We're two Michigan transplants now living in Southwest Florida.
In fact, we're cousins born in 1964, just a month apart.
I like to meditate.
And I like to play bass in a band.
I'm into chanting Om.
And I'm into throwing down some classic rock.
But together, we're on a mission
to promote people that are helping other people.
We want to make the world a better place.
One conversation at a time.
So sit back,
turn up the volume,
and get ready to laugh.
Because we like to have fun
while we spread the love.
Interviewing lovely people. Yes, we have fun.
Let's rock and roll.
Okay, welcome to Yogi and the Beach Man. Today we have a special episode with Stephanie Ray and Jayme Vance, the co-founders of The Nature of Mind Body. They're both therapists, yoga teachers, outdoor guides. And hey, you guys, I'm Jim the Yogi.
I'm Rick Beach, the Beach Man.
Welcome to our show. We're so thrilled to have you both on.
Yeah, it's great to have you guys.
Yeah, it's the first time that we've podcasted with two people in two different Zoom locations. So this is a first for us.
So hopefully all the tech works out.
Yeah. Now, Stephanie, I've known you for years. We go back a ways. And Jayme, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thanks for having us.
And I recognize your location there, Stephanie, in Hope, Idaho, because I've been there.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
I've actually sat in this exact location before.
I remember.
Really?
Yeah. Jayme, where are you at?
So I'm currently in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where are you from?
Well, I've been living, I'm originally from New Jersey, actually.
Okay.
I've been living in Richmond for a couple years. Currently, I'm not actually living here. I live on a school bus at the moment, and I'm just kind of passing through. So bopping around.
So where are you headed?
So back out west towards Colorado. So yeah.
Nice.
Utah, getting the fall time in the desert is the goal.
Oh, beautiful.
But it does get pretty cold out there. You're coming into winter. Why don't you head south where we are and that kind of stuff? Because it gets cold up in Utah. And I love the desert, but I don't go in the winter.
Yeah.
I went once. I love Utah. It's spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
So we just survived Hurricane Milton, which was yesterday, literally last night. We podcasted the day before the hurricane and now the day after. So
the timing was
amazing.
Was good.
Wow.
But we're not at our usual location.
No, we're usually in my living room.
In Jim's studio. He has a really nice living room studio set up. But now we're at my house because I have power. So.
And he has Wi-Fi.
And Wi-Fi and power, and Jim does not.
I really like the background.
I thought my background looked cool till you showed up. And then... when I bought this house, I walked around the backyard that way. And I walked in and I saw that, and it reminded me of Northern Michigan, and I'm from Michigan. Well, we're both from Michigan, and I'm like, all right, this has got a great vibe. I like it here. The rest of the house needs a little love, but I really didn't care because it felt like this is the house I needed to be in, just because of that big pine tree right there is why.
He's got that great view, and he's also got a channel back behind there. So
nice.
There's a canal in the back, and a lot of it got cleared out.
Oh, nice.
Yesterday. And so I hope it wasn't
getting excited.
Yeah, I was sorry. No, I couldn't see the canal before, but the hurricane cleared me out a nice, cool little area back there. I could to work on that's gonna be fun.
Anyway. But I understand. I don't know if you both were, but I know Stephanie got caught in Asheville for the hurricane like a week ago, right?
Yes, Jayme was actually there with me. We were there to run one of our retreats, and the day that everybody was supposed to gather in Asheville is when the hurricane came through.
Oh, wow.
And then the day that the retreat was supposed to happen was the day after the hurricane, so the 28th. And it was really difficult to fully assess the damages as it was raining. But then after getting out and looking, it was just pretty bad. And then when cell phone towers went down, it went from to a bad situation pretty quick. So we had to cancel it and, questioned what is this the right thing to do? How do we navigate this? And then when the governor of North Carolina said that all roads are closed and you can only travel if it's an emergency, we're like, yeah, that was probably the right call.
Yeah, for
For
sure.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of
definitely a lot of sadness and grief around. I mean, Jayme and I, we've processed and talked a lot about it, but it's just been like
Mhm.
layers upon layers of like the sadness and grief of having to cancel this event of that we planned for so long and put in so much time, um, and not being able to host that space and curate that space, to like once when we knew that all of our participants were safe, then it was like this next layer of like, oh my gosh, are our people in Asheville safe? And so we did a couple of runs, brought them fuel and food and water. Um, and once when we knew they were safe, then it was, oh my gosh, like really taking in the devastation and the community around. So
Yeah, it's so
it's been
sad.
layers upon layers. It's been difficult, but we've been working together to process it and just support each other through it.
I'm
Yeah.
a veteran of several major hurricanes because I've lived
Mm.
right here in this general vicinity for 25, 6 years now. But I was wondering about what in North Carolina during this craziness and what just happened last week. What was it like? Because it could have been like a hurricane like we have here, where it blows in at 130 miles an hour. That's not what really happened. Was it just torrential downpours and
Yeah.
a slow moving, never ending thunderstorm?
Yeah, I mean the one of the issues is that had been raining so much leading up to the hurricane, and it had
Mhm.
been such a dry season before that, so the water kind of was starting to build up without anywhere to go before it came through. And then it was just, yeah, it was just a lot of rain in a short period of time, which I think broke some dams up above at Lake Lore and a couple other spots. And other than like with Florida, you have like a not as much of a change of topography, but when you look at, Asheville, it's sitting, it is the water drainage of all the mountains that it like
Mhm.
beautifully sits in the middle of, which is why it's gorgeous and beautiful. But when there's nowhere for the water to go except the low point, it's just a massive area that converged into the lowest spot, which is where everybody lives in the valleys. So
Yeah,
yeah.
And
had to be
and
a
it
mess.
could have never been expected. I mean, you
No.
just
Right.
never in a million years would
Oh, we
you have
know.
thought that would happen.
We know.
Yeah. And they did
Yeah.
have like at least tropical force winds there because I've seen videos of guys
So
Mhm.
got up to
roofs
40,
being
50
blown off and
really?
Yeah.
oh yeah.
No, wasn't trying to diminish any of
Yeah.
that. I just didn't know. I just saw the aftermath because once we got through it, I was kind of over it, and then all of a sudden, bam!
Mhm.
North Carolina's wrecked, and I was like, "Geez,
Yeah.
I should have
Yeah.
paid more attention when it was happening."
I mean, I don't even think it was publicly really known the damage until a few days later. So it was
Yeah,
Sure.
so
it took
wild.
me by surprise. It's like, Joe,
Yeah,
and
because
then
people couldn't get information out.
well, because last
Yeah.
week then I drove through Punta Gorda, which is, my favorite
20
little
minutes.
town, 15 minutes from here. And I drove through the historic district on Saturday last week, I remember. And I'm just driving through, and some of the older homes in there were built 50, 60 years ago. There was no building codes or anything. And they're actually at ground level, maybe a foot or two above the harbor. And the water line was over the doorknobs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that was just, I had just was driving through Punta Gorda seeing this, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And I'm like getting a little emotional because I'm like, man, these are people that
Mm-hmm.
I hang with. I know these people. I've lived here forever.
Yeah.
And then to have it happen again yesterday with
A week later. Like,
jeez.
My
Gosh.
goodness.
Yeah. It's
yeah,
Yeah.
they
been
got
awesome.
hit harder this time.
But the
Yeah.
stuff up where, but at least here the water left,
Mm-hmm.
and we
Yeah.
could get back to regular life, even if your house is wrecked. You're gonna have a roof over your head if you live here.
Mhm.
But where
Mhm.
in North Carolina, it's not that way. People are still stranded week and a half now, 2 weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just, and there's just no reason for that. It's just
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like I mean, to my knowledge, Asheville is not a town that typically gets wrecked by hurricanes. And so
No.
the infrastructure just isn't there to help move this water or create whatever needs to happen quickly. Yeah, it just wasn't there. So it just could not handle the amount of rain and winds and
And so many roads got completely wiped out. Those mountain
oh
roads are
yeah,
just totally
bridges,
gone,
roads.
eroded. Yeah.
Yeah.
Several times
Yeah.
Jamie and I were like trying to get to our friends and then all of a sudden, like, a bridge was completely out, or there's a river now in the middle of the road, or a tree is down. Like, when I
Yeah.
first tried to leave Asheville, I think it took me close to 30, 40 minutes just to make it 2 miles to the highway of just trying to figure out how to get out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys were there for a retreat. What you want to tell us about the retreat you guys did?
I was just gonna say, let's switch gears, get out this and say, hey, had this all went down as planned. There you go, Jim. No, yeah, what's
Yeah.
going on? How do your retreats work? They sound cool.
Thank you. So the nature of mind body kind of is created with 3 different businesses under one. I do my private practice on the nature of mind body counseling, and Jayme does health and wellness coaching under the nature of mind body coaching. And we collaborate together with our clients. So I will therapeutically process and get a client to a stage where they are understanding, recognizing, identifying all of their unconscious behaviors and patterns. And then we start to identify goals and how to get there. And that's when I start to collaborate with Jayme, and she kind of takes over that piece of like helping with implementing these goals and supporting a lifestyle change, because we are in the business of holistic, integrative mental well-being, so to speak. So those are the 2 of the 3, and then we have our retreat business, where we have people that come and we take them backpacking or camping, and we try to incorporate psychoeducation around around neuroscience and psychology. We integrate mindfulness techniques, nature integration, and a little bit of play, um, to teach people about trauma and how it shows up in not just what we do, but also how we think and how we perceive the world around us.
I really want to hear more about that, how it all works, how you bring that into the you're out in nature, camping, I'm assuming, hiking.
Mm-hmm.
How does all
Yeah.
that? It's not like sitting down at your couch with a therapist. This is a lot different.
Yeah. Yeah. We've done it a couple different ways where we've done, like Steph said, some backpackings where we actually get into the backcountry and then we're like fully immersed. And to make it more accessible as well, we have the option of doing like a front country camping, where we have an outdoor kitchen and a fire pit, maybe a sleeping platform, or your varying levels of people's comfort, because we understand that not everybody has that experience or comfort stepping into that space. But we really feel strongly about what nature could do when to your mental health, to your nervous system, in rewiring your experience, what it allows when you have that deeper sense-based connection to the outdoors. So we want to also, when we do like even with the backpacking trips, they're made to be for beginners. So we're only going in a couple miles. We teach anything you need to know to be backpacking, so that's also a tool you could have in your toolbox, and make it so that people could have the gear, rent it from us if needed. So really encouraging people also that in the outdoor space. So a lot of what we do, as Steph said, is education focused, but the goal is that once you also understand how your mind and your body and how they work together and how they're experiencing the world and the lens in which you work through, that once you've had that realization, you could start kind of putting tools in your toolbox on ways to help regulate yourself. So we really want people to step out of that space with actionable practices or things to move forward with. So a lot of what we try and really focus on, in addition to the education, is giving a lot of experiential, embodied practices that could be carried on afterwards. And we really focused, both being licensed practitioners, like we want to be evidence-based in what we're incorporating. So we like to teach about the science and the research about like kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so that's a big focus of ours, as well as trying to keep up to date with all of that. And if knowledge is power, empowering people to understand how they work and giving them the tools and letting them have the autonomy on how to move forward. Yeah.
Tell me more about the science and how it changes your nervous system. That's pretty incredible.
Of nature in general, or
yes, yeah, the nature part. Sorry.
Okay, so this is a really big question. where to start, it's a natural regulator. And so even sitting down and when we're looking at the trauma model of like the triune brain, we have our reptilian brainstem. And in therapy, we talk about top down.
Wait. This just went choo. Let's
Okay, bro,
go
bring
back
it
to
back. We'll bring it back.
Yeah, let's go back to the
Okay.
word before the brainstem, the trillium brains.
Reptilian.
No, but there was another word in there.
Triune brain. So
Yes.
the 3-part brain. It's a therapeutic model.
Okay,
Like
trium, TRIUM.
UN, triune. Ooh,
Triune. Okay.
now I'm questioning it.
No, I got it. Just slow down a little bit. I got to absorb things.
Maybe edit out me saying I'm questioning it.
No.
Double check it. Edit. Okay, I use my 1 of 3. So when we're looking at the brain and we're assessing it or looking at it through the lens of trauma, through that triune, the 3 different brains that we have, we look to the brainstem or the reptilian brain. And in therapy, you can have 2 types of trauma processing. You have top down, which is more cognitive and talking about your experience. But for a lot of people, just talking about their experience can completely re-traumatize everything else, because their lower brains and their nervous system does not know that it's not happening. Like that's where those like our brains split. And so this other part, or this other type of trauma processing is called bottom up. And so a lot of people may have heard of it as somatic processing, where we really work first with the nervous system to regulate the nervous system before we even start talking. And so there's tons of different methods and techniques to bring that nervous system back online. And one of it is like through rhythm, movement, sounds that are soothing, or there's like the sound of the ocean. It's that rhythmic sound. So we can utilize nature to drop into all 5 senses, to use mindfulness to come back to our senses and live a more embodied experience of the nature, where we can actually like feel a part of our body that feels wind, and we can hear the birds around us, and we can smell the pine trees, and we can see 5 different colors. And so it just helps us. We can completely use nature to help embody the person and teach them how to come back to themselves. Jayme, is there anything you'd like to add on to that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of describing it. When we're talking about, the opposite end of dysregulation, which is, in your body is the nervous system, we can't speak to the nervous system, but we're internally speaking to our nervous system. So our nervous system is constantly sending signals from our brain to our body. So what we're talking about is the other direction in which it works, is sending signals to the rest of our body through our sensory system, through what we take in through our nervous system, to tell ourselves that we're actually okay and we're safe, and how to regulate ourselves. So we're like kind of Steph's described, we're kind of going outwards in rather than thinking inwards and it projecting out, right? Because we could all probably been an experience where we've had anxious thoughts and our heart races and our body tenses and everything starts to unfold. So we're kind of going the opposite end and like telling our body we're okay by smelling a beautiful pine. Like there's science around specifically certain pine trees and the smell that they let off, what it actually does to our body. That's why there's a lot of great research around essential oils, and what you'll see is a lot of scents that we get similarly from the outdoors have a really positive impact for our mental and well-being. So we're kind of telling our body that this is okay, that they're safe, and we're allowing ourselves to come back into a regulated state. So that's kind of what is foundational for us. We personally have both, completely changed our lives through our connection with nature. So, we've had the experiential for both of us, and now we've really enjoyed learning the science these last few years and bringing it out. And really, the field of ecotherapy is forest bathing, all of that is growing, and there's great science coming on around it. So kind of the container that we're trying to create is educating that, why it works, having people understand, so that I think, again, there's that buy-in, and then giving them the experience.
Well, one of the coolest experiences I think I've ever had, and I think this will kind of relate. Is I was in the just north of San Francisco. It was our last day before I came home, and I had the red eye back, so to head till 11 o'clock or 10:30 at night to still do some stuff. Ended up in a redwood forest state park, and I remember just laying down, putting a meditation video or audio in my ears, and just staring up at the redwoods, which were just amazing on their own. But I had never really experienced adding that additional sensory sense of the incredible smells and just and that was very immersive. And that's got to be exactly the kind of things you're talking about here.
Yeah,
Of
absolutely.
the memories of that trip, that was one of the super highlights, because I think it added that extra sense that unless you're in an Italian bakery or something like that, or my grandma's kitchen when I was 8, I still can smell her ravioli.
Mhm.
And that, well, I've actually heard, I don't want to, not for certain on this, but people remember those things. They imprint deeper in their thoughts than
So
they.
in your brain, where your olfactory is, where you can smell things, it's very, very close to your where you store memories. And so that's why when we do have a scent 40, 50 years later, it brings us right back to
It
maybe
does.
Mhm.
It
grandma's
so
kitchen.
much
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of the stuff that we talk about on our trips, and it's definitely a passion of ours because there's so much that you can do, right? Like even even Jayme speaks very good on this. So I'm just gonna toss it to you and hand it off to you. But even the science of awe.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that when you were talking. I was like, I wonder if you're in like an awe moment, which is, kind of is if you read some psychology tests is starting to come up in this, like what it actually provides us in benefit. And it's a lot very similar to what we get and we're knowing about like practices of gratitude and how good that is for our emotional and mental well-being. We're seeing a lot of that in the awe research as well. All the good hormones that we want we're getting released in an awe experience. And we're seeing similarly, like you're saying, awe moments also have this peak experience for us where we experience it more full sensory is what they're saying. So nature's one way that we experience awe. Another way that we get it is actually the number one trigger for awe is actually also in community and with other people. So which is why we love working in groups when we do this. But also nature is kind of the second after that. When you imagine being at that beautiful vista at a sunrise, and it is a full sensory experience, right? You're getting this incredible view. You feel that amazing smell, and all of that when you're having this awe experience gets wired in your body. Like your memories become in that sense a in that moment a full sensory memory, which is really healthy memory for your body and your nervous system to have. And it gets ingrained in a really positive way rather than what we're talking about, just a trauma experience is where you're totally shut off from your nervous system. So these all experiences in natures are literally at the opposite end of that. And they're really good for overall emotional and mental well-being to have that. And what's cool and what's I'm excited about what we try and do is that yes, you could get that from these massively beautiful experiences, but one of the practices we really like to bring in is finding gratitude for nature. And with that is bringing awe into the small things. So there's an activity that I like to bring in without going too much into it. It's called camera, and it really allows people to really focus in even on like the microcosmic level of the beauty around you in nature, right? Like a beautiful piece of moss on a log that's fallen perfectly amongst yellowing leaves, right? Like that is beautiful if you take a moment and you could appreciate it with gratitude and drop into the moment and then experience the awe because you're fully aware of what's happening. Um, so like Steph said, there's a wealth of opportunity when you're outside.
Right.
Totally.
And I find too that when we're doing therapy and we're going kind of into the people's psychology and like deeper unconscious patterns and habits and whatnot, it's like when you can be removed from the environment that you have already wired yourself to interact with, that is creating some sort of dysfunction in the way that you're living your life, if you can remove them and bring them into nature, which there's a lot of research coming out on how sunlight impacts our circadian rhythm and our endocrine
Mhm.
system. And these, like, there's so many people that they wake up and then they're inside all day. And so to bring them outside and allow for nature to regulate their body system, it's all encompassing, like their nervous system.
Yeah, who would have thunk it? Getting outside and enjoying some fresh air and being in the
Sunshine,
sunshine.
vitamin
Hey,
D.
that's why I moved here when I did in my 30s, because I couldn't deal with the 5-6 months indoors up in Michigan. In the wintertime, I just could not do it. It affected my mental health so much, and I spent so much time outside, and it boggles my mind that people just, because it doesn't
Right.
take a rocket scientist to know that this has got to be good for you.
Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
the same thing too is like we know that vitamin D comes from the sun and that it's best metabolized through the skin. And absolutely, cabin fever and the winter blues are real and it usually hits come January, February, March, because people in Michigan, I was a northern Michigander and I'm also a northern Idahoan. It's that lack of sunlight on your body that's you're not getting enough vitamin D, and that's also contributing to depression and sadness. And they actually that in the DSM-5, it's actually called SAD, seasonal affective disorder. And I'm like, that's so appropriate because that's how it feels.
It's also the acronym for our American diet, which is funny.
What is it?
Standard American diet.
Standard American
yeah,
diet.
which is
Yeah,
very
which is
bad.
90% crap.
Yeah.
yeah.
So we both stumbled across something on your profile, and we were like, what
We
the heck
both
is
wrote
that?
it down.
Yeah, polyvagal somatic therapy.
But I think you mentioned it already. You came across, I know you referenced it already earlier.
Yeah. So it's very much so there's lots of different theories and techniques of working with the nervous system, and they're
Can you
all
explain what polyvagal somatic, just what those words mean?
Yeah.
so polyvagal is a modality, and it's a theory of how the nervous system works, of when the dorsal vagal nerve and how the parasympathetic versus the sympathetic, and is it the vagus nerve that is putting on the brakes or speeding things up. So it's just like a theory and how the nervous system works, especially in community and connection. But all polyvagal theory it's underneath that whole branch of bottom up therapy. So it's in line with somatics. It's just like a guideline of that psychoeducation piece of like, okay, so I understand what I'm doing, but why am I doing it? If that makes sense.
And I actually had bottom up written earlier because you had brought that up right when you started saying this, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about that and what would qualify, because I think you're describing me. So I want to
Okay, so top down versus bottom up. This is what the question is what is bottom up?
Right.
So it comes back to the brain model, where if you like use your hand as a representation of your brain, like this is your brain stem, and then this is your mammalian brain, and these two work together to give you the fight, flight, or freeze. And then you have your cortex, which is kind of all over, like protecting all the lower parts. And your cortex is what essentially gives you the ability to disinhibit the fight, flight, or freeze. And it gives us the ability to be in connection and critically think, be
Executive
logical, be
functioning.
rational,
Yeah.
executive functioning. Yes.
All the
So
good things.
all the good things. So again, when we're going top down, it's talking about the layers of the brain. So the top down would be the cortex. And it's essentially that we're able to talk about our problems and then slowly get into those deeper somatic places and be able to resolve them through just by understanding ourselves, being seen, being validated, being heard, and processing.
Yeah, that's not me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Because sometimes what we're finding with trauma is that just by talking about it, it can re-traumatize people. So that's where it goes bottom up. And so you go through the brain stem first, and you go through the brain stem through that rhythmic motion and movement, coming back to your senses, listening to the sounds around you. And it's learning how to be safe somatically in your body, in your nervous system first, and learn how to regulate it so that you can get to a place where you can talk about what happened to you and not have a traumatic response.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to go from bottom up. Again, like that's where that's where we like to use nature to then okay, if we're speaking a sense, like we're not using words, we're speaking through the senses now, right? We're talking to our brain through our senses. So let's go ahead and do some eye exercises in the outdoors and practice opening up our peripheral vision to see all the beauty in birds around us, or to scan the forest floor from the bottom to the sky and then back. What are 5 things you could see, and what's the furthest thing you could see, right? Now we're using our visual sentence, and there's a lot that happens in our optic nerve. Again, as Steph mentioned, the olfactory being connected to certain parts of our brain, the senses that surround your eyes, the optic nerve, go directly to your brain in an area that actually helps you calm. Right. In yoga, you're probably used to that with like the warm sense over the eye. Well, actually expanding your peripheral vision and doing exercises with the eyes is also really beneficial in regulating your sensory system and calming your mind. So, we could kind of speak to our brain through the senses and through regulating that. So, that's kind of how we work. I like to think of from like outside to go in.
Mhm.
And we were wired outside, right? Like we are animals just like everybody else and everything else, I should say, around us. Like our bodies were meant to exist outdoors. So they're wired that way. So we are trying to also come back to a natural state of being when we connect outside, um, which is more regulated.
I'm really intrigued with this retreat aspect of things. So, can you give me an idea of like what's the itinerary? Show up, get out of the off the airplane. Where's your next one go? Where's your next one at?
Our next one will be on the outskirts of Austin, Texas.
Okay, so I'd get
And
off the plane in Austin, and what would happen to me from there?
so you would meet us at a hotel and we'd pick you up in our fun white van and we'd schlep you out to beautiful glamping tents set or a glamping camp setup.
Okay.
And essentially we would have like an opening ceremony, and we typically have a very straight and forward like outline of a schedule. So we'll wake up pretty early, we'll have hot drinks, and then we send folks off to a sit spot. So everybody disperses, they sit in nature for an undisclosed amount of time.
Undisclosed.
And we send them out with journal prompts. So, and then we tell them like, okay, for until you hear the first coyote howl, just sit. Like, don't journal, don't read, just sit and be present. And then we'll coyote howl, to which they'll open up their prompt, and then we'll give them some time to journal about the prompt. And then when they come in, we do yoga, somatic movements. While that's happening, the best breakfast that you'll ever eat in your entire life is being cooked by our chef, which is Jamie's husband, Luke. And then we go into breakfast. And before all of our meals, we like to practice gratitude, because there's a lot of science behind that practice in and of itself. And then early on the day, we tend to do lecture and teach about either the neuroscience or psychology. We teach about CBT, cognitive distortions, choice theory, lots of fun stuff. And then throughout the day, we'll go for a hike. Jayme is incredibly knowledgeable on the flora and fauna, so we'll get some guided education hikes. We learn a lot about leaves. We learn about how to identify plants, how to smell them. And she's sneaky because she's also sneaking in a lot of like the mindfulness stuff of like, oh, here you go, people, smell this pine cone or whatever. Yeah. And then Jayme and I, we have many interventions in our back pocket that we like to construct the experiential part. Would you like to add anything, Jayme?
I think a lot about it is, we have this like general outline, kind of a guiding trick. So me and Steph have been both guiding for over a decade. We met working in wilderness therapy, is to just be like, hey, see what it's like to just like be in the moment, release control of what's going to happen next. Because we're probably not going to tell you, which allows people to we want them to mostly drop into the experience. Like, we're going to create the container so that you could just be. And it also allows us to be really flexible and just read the group and see what the needs are. Like, is the energy low? Let's do a high energy activity. So we have a lot of fun activities that, like Steph said, play is important to us, but we could get a lot out of if we're going to play a game, there's an intention behind it, or an exercise that we're doing, or nature art, which is a very mindful, embodied experience as well. So kind of the afternoon gig, we have usually like to have a lot of creativity about where we take the day. But as Steph said, like doing an embodied practice, and some sort of mindfulness practice, both at the beginning and the end of the day. So we're practicing trying to regulate our system. And then another huge component, and is when we get there and we do a ceremony and we're dropping in and we're setting intentions, um, is the connection that they have to each other. So like we're holding a container, but like the real magic also happens in connection and community. Steph will talk about needs, like understanding our basic needs, and one of our basic needs, as much as all of our other survival needs, and again, you could track this back to how we've developed, but is love and belonging, and is being in connection. And that could be so healing, and to be seen and to be validated. So we do a lot to try and also form a safe space, and talk about emotional safety, so that when everybody feels comfortable to share, but also then that connection blooms and they could see each other in the space they're in, they could feel validated by themselves. And so fostering that, however needs to look, is really priority to us, and constantly us having the conversation, me and Steph, of making sure that we're tending to everybody's needs individually so that they could show up as a group as a whole.
That sounds like a wonderful day out in nature. Yeah,
Mhm.
doing a lot of activities that I know I would really enjoy. I'm sure do you get people that are like really resistant to what's going on, or all of a sudden like it's too much for them, or they start to have a breakdown?
We haven't had anybody, and correct me if I'm wrong, who's completely resistant.
Mhm.
Naturally, in trauma responses, it's going to be fight, flight, or freeze. Um, and so sometimes we see people starting to, their sympathetic nervous system starts getting agitated and worked up.
Mhm.
And Jayme and I, we've been working in this industry for so long, and we are both mental health professionals ourselves. So we have that trained eye to see it, and we're able to like hold that space for them and process. And we haven't had a huge, like, we haven't had a breakdown. We've had people get close, but we were able to help them come back to their bodies and regulate. And we had, it reminds me of one of our participants. She had been in and out of the mental hospital several times for the last 8 years, and has struggled immensely when it gets dark outside, and also
Oh.
had a trauma response every time somebody was behind her. And in the first 24 hours she came out on our trip, she was
Mhm.
able to work through that, and she was able to have people walk behind her, and she checked in, and she was teary of saying like how freeing that was for her. And she actually she came back, and that was a front country one because the woods would have been too much for her. She actually came
Mhm.
back and did our backpacking trip, and she was a mentor to others. And we like to check in on our participants throughout the year, so we'll send messages. And I don't want to spoil what else we do, but she had said that she had been integrating the practices that we've taught her into her life, and noticing how much better she felt in her body and how much more regulated she was able to stay um, when a old trigger would come up.
Mhm.
Mhm. Now,
Yeah.
you're both yoga teachers. Are you bringing in breath work to work with the nervous system?
Yeah, we teach a lot about the science of the breath and how to manipulate different ratios, and
Mhm.
again, just more tools for their toolbox.
And you said somatic movement earlier. I'm not sure exactly what that means either.
So somatic processing is it looks very different for everybody. What might be appropriate for one person could be not appropriate for the next. And somatic processing just means processing your emotions physically. And so like one of them would be like shaking your hands, or like stomping on the ground, just to move that energy out of your body. And again, it's that somatic, it's that rhythmic, it's talking to your nervous system to get your nervous system back online. So somatic, it could also mean like on every inhalation, raising your hands on every exhalation, bringing your hands around you. It's just very simple movement to, again, talk to your brain and talk to your body, giving your nervous system inputs so that it can like it can let go and feel safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just when you have any trips to the Grand Canyon planned?
Oh,
No, but we did guide there before on a totally different company, but no trip to the Grand
I
Canyon.
did a hike like 3/4 of the way down 2 years ago to her. No, it was during COVID, so yeah, it was 2021 or 22. Did like 7 miles down and back. That was I just can't wait to go back. If there's a place on that calls me, it's that place.
Mm.
I see why.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, there's a magic out there.
Now,
Definitely.
Stephanie, I've told you this before that you literally changed my life with one story you told me. And I'd like you to share that story if you need a reminder. It was your lesson on hard, easy, easy, hard. And I think
Oh, yeah.
anybody listening can benefit from this because literally it changed my life because I started applying hard, easy, easy, hard into my life, and it just made such a huge difference on the
You're
simplest things.
right. Yeah. So another reason why we do this in the wilderness is because nature is the most perfect mirror, like for our own unconscious habits and patterns. And yeah, I discovered hard, easy, easy, hard when I was guiding in the desert, and I didn't realize that I was an easy hard. And I'll explain what that means. But I had set up my A-frame tent. We're just using P cord and tarp. Set it up, just kind of half-assed it. Put like a teeny tiny rock on every corner, and I was like, yeah, that looks great. And I got in the bed, went to sleep, and this is like winter time. And in the middle of the night, this storm just came ripping through, and it was pouring rain. It was freezing cold, and all of my corners of my shelter was totally just flapping in the wind. So I had to leave my warm sleeping bag, get out, get soaking wet, and like now I'm trying to find all these rocks, and like now I'm trying really hard to like set myself up so that this didn't happen again. And that's when I realized that I had a habit of taking the easy way out now and then having to do the hard thing later. So, like, took the easy way out and I didn't bomb proof my shelter. I just kind of threw it up and I was like, yeah, that looks good. But I paid majorly because I didn't take the time or put the quality or attention that it needed. Um, and so I had to look at all of the many areas of my life where I would do the easy hard, where I wouldn't do the thing and I would just deal with it later. But by the time I dealt with it later, or because I didn't do the thing now, it was so much harder to deal with that in like afterwards. And so I had to be very intentional of recognizing that pattern, that unconscious pattern behavior that I was slowly starting to understand. I had to pay attention and watch any time that that would come up, and I would have to swap it and do the hard thing now so that it could be easier for myself later.
Now, as you saw you're getting this processing down in your brain, what activities were you finding that you were mostly choosing the easy hard?
Like the easy hard, like
Mm-hmm.
all the little stuff that like life demands of like keeping up with the laundry and doing my dishes and
Yeah.
making a doctor's appointment and all those little things. I was just like I didn't want to do, and it all piled up and I had to deal with it eventually.
Yeah. I know
And
one
that's
of the smallest tasks for me is like dishes. I
yeah,
mean, if you just rinse them off, it makes them so much easier to clean later if you're going to put them off. But if you just set them
exactly.
there and they dry and everything's crusty, you took the easy way out. Now you got to scrub all those things.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I try to remember all the time to apply hard, easy now. Do those difficult things, make it easy on myself later.
Yep. Yep. I
There's
definitely sorry, go ahead, Jamie.
I was to say there's another That was like a big motto where we used to work, is like realizing, because the wilderness just gives all the opportunities to do that. Like if you don't pack your bag right, and you don't take the time to pack your bag, that lumpy pack you're gonna feel for the next 4 hours, right? Another like metaphor is like looking to nature, right? Like when you see a storm, one thing that they like talk about is like there's several animals, the bison, one of them, the buffalo, but there's other animals that'll head directly into the storm because they know that's the quickest way through. So it's a very
Wow.
similar, it's like, okay, what's the way through this difficult situation is to actually meet it head on and do it now, right? Like if I'm running away trying to avoid it, it's gonna keep following me. I'll feel the weight of that, the prolonged, and it's still gonna come. So actually, if I just head straight in and look at and a lot of animals will do that, they will head to the storm, and to allow it to pass. So, there's also, that's one of the things we love talking about at our retreats, is like the endless amount of metaphors. There's so many lessons of the
Yeah.
outdoors can be applied
Yeah.
to life. It's great medicine out there.
But there are some people, going back to what you just said, headed toward the storm. There are some people and personality types that thrive on that, though.
Yeah.
They just have to have that. And I know over the years I've become to recognize that more of that's the person I really choose to not hang around with so much, because that's not me. I want to be the opposite. I want no drama. I don't want
Right.
no
And
storms. No
because we can
storms.
Right. And because we can look at that as a metaphor, and it's like how we do one thing is kind of how we do everything. If we're looking at somebody who is always chasing after these really intense situations, that is a symptom of trauma where it doesn't feel safe to rest. It feels safer to stay in that fight, flight, or freeze state because you can predict what's going to happen, and that's how our nervous system tries to protect us, is in that prediction. And so it's staying in that heightened state feels safer. It's totally counterintuitive, but it feels safer than if we were able to relax. So
My ex-wife would go, and we've been divorced for about 15 years now, but I remember it was always, if it was peace and mellow goodness, I knew after about 3 or 4 weeks, something's up. It's been too long. It's gonna happen. Something's gonna erupt, and it always did. And then it was just a never-ending cycle of when it. She had to have drama. There was just no being
Mhm.
a steady
And
state of happiness. And the better it got, the more I knew it was going. It would some crazy shit was coming, and
mhm.
it always did. And that was, one of the reasons. Well, we'll get into that some other time when I'm maybe sitting around a campfire with you guys. But yeah, that's
Well, you're even
that's a good way to
describing
put
what
that.
we're talking about too, is like for you, when things were calm, you couldn't relax in it because even you were kind of like
Because
waiting
I
for
knew it
the
was
shoe to
coming,
drop.
right? Right.
Exactly. So that's an example.
But I've always attracted that kind of crazy woman.
Well, there, because your nervous system feels safe in always waiting for the shoe to drop because you can predict it, and then you know what to do to try to prevent it or avoid it or appease it or whatever. And that's your unconscious pattern. When we're talking about trauma, it's not always soldiers who go away to war. Trauma happens interpersonally too, because of one of the things Jayme said is that one of our absolute needs for survival is connection. The only, like, when you look at the human body, we are so inept. Like, we don't have fur to keep us warm. We've got thumbs. Great. Why we are where we're at is because of our brains and our ability to connect. We literally need connection for survival, and our nervous system can sense when we are in connection and when we are not. And if we can pick up on abandonment or rejection, we're going to have a flight, or freeze response. And over time, based off of childhood rearing patterns or long term partnerships, our nervous system picks up on these things and then it starts to try and protect us. And one of those ways is to keep putting ourselves in the same partnerships because we can predict what's going to happen. Remember, prediction can keep us safe.
For a while. Yeah.
It's counterintuitive, Logically, your cortex knows for a while, but your nervous system does not know. And that's why it's counterintuitive.
Oh, I'm self-reflecting.
Good.
I'll do
Well-
that later.
While he's reflecting,
Yes,
question.
yeah. There you go, Jim.
So, so I've read recently or heard recently that, like what you're talking about being out in nature, and this wasn't the example, but when you get that almost high or euphoric feeling from nature or anything, when you're, feeling great, that eventually your nervous system has to go the opposite direction. And you can have these huge letdowns. And the whole article or whatnot was about, trying not to let that take you too far down. Does that come up in your work?
Well, one of the things that we really advocate for is making it an accessible and attainable practice so that it's not like you don't have to go backpacking for 3 days is what we're trying to teach. Like the kind of the things that we're teaching, the little like the, what I call tools in your toolbox, the options, we're really thinking about these are short things you could do daily. Like these are tiny things. Like Sit Spot's very foundational, and that we partner a lot with this wonderful nonprofit called Living Earth School, and that is something that they really have brought in. And so like a sit spot is, it should be an accessible spot from your home that you could sit at every day and observe the world around you and sit in silence for a bit. That's one of them, but like we'll teach some other activities that involve, movement in the outdoors, or, if someone's really artistic and they loved nature art, great, like go do that for 10 minutes every day so that we're not getting these big swings. But our goal is to regulate your nervous system. So you're only going to regulate your nervous system by doing it every day, right? The same thing with neuroplasticity, understanding how the brain works. It's not like a one-time thing. We want this to be a regular reoccurring thing so that we're repatterning our thoughts, that we are repatterning our nervous system and our emotions and our actions and behaviors. That is like every other muscle in your body. It takes practice and time. So we really encourage, and that's why we're not doing one thing for prolonged. We're trying to do, okay, we understand that everybody learns different. We connect differently. Some of us are kinesthetic, some of us more visual learners, whatever it is. They were also going to have different ways of connecting to what works for us if we're body based, if we're art based, if we're thought based. So we really try and do as much as we can to squeeze in the myriad of what we know as options of coping skills, whatever you want to call it, so that people could kind of keep that as a regular practice. And that's what we're currently actually trying to build out more. We have the last day we focus on kind of setting SMART goals for themselves, and we'd like to make that an even longer term, or where we could really integrate how to really teach how to integrate it into daily practice and support. So we're looking at we were requested to kind of have more follow-up and a course afterwards that people can continue with to continue the community of support that they've created together, or whatever it is. So we're looking to build that out so that there is kind of more support to integrate that afterwards, so that it does become a daily practice.
Okay. You mentioned a couple times now nature art, and I'm kind of in my mind, I'm thinking I know what it is, but I'm not 100% sure.
I mean, it could be so many different things. We like to bring in I love Andy Goldsworthy. So if you've not checked out his art, do check out his art.
Who's that?
Andy Goldsworthy.
Okay.
He's, I would say, probably he's a nature artist, and he's probably the most famous nature artist. So we'll bring out some of his big books, just to give some inspiration. But it really is about, just taking. It's amazing what people create. Just going out in nature, and we ask everyone to kind of just maintain the silence, and just to start looking at what's around them and creating. And it's really beautiful because, again, you get that microcosmic beauty experience too. Like, wow, I hadn't really looked at the different colors in this leaf that I can now build out. Or, I taught at University of Virginia for a few years, and I would do this with my students. And we had a nature and mindfulness class on campus. And so some of them would also just create giant pieces, and they'd stack huge sticks and everything, but they were more about getting in their body in that like big strong way. And some students would create these just like beautiful, color pieces of art or patterned piece of art using sticks and twigs and leaves and nuts and whatever they found. And so it's really about just like interacting and getting into nature and putting it together in your own way. And, we're having that practice of non-attachment and impermanence, because when you're done, we have to LNT, leave no trace the area, and disperse it. So again, tons of metaphors. Where me and Steph used to work, we also would sometimes do it as a group. So kind of create sometimes we could give a prompt, like you're gonna nature art, but like think about it as it relates to your family system, or the intention you're setting for yourself right now, or something you want to let go of. Or you could do it as a group and give a prompt that is more focused. It would be a group that knew each other longer than ideally the few days that we're working, but you could do it as a group building activity. And you get a really interesting expression coming out. So we have some really beautiful pictures of what people have created, who don't
Do you put
necessarily.
those on your website, or?
We should get some on our
We
website.
will put that on our website. That's a great idea. Thank you so much.
That actually is a pretty cool idea.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like that what you guys do is just a really, it must be just a great job, number one, and one of those where you just look forward to going to work every day, and you're helping people at the same time. So God bless you guys. Jeez.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Speaking of helping people, we've been asking this question. A friend of mine, Mike, in California, came and had dinner with Abby and I here in Punta Gorda, and we were talking website or podcasting and stuff, and he gave me this idea. So we've been rolling with it for about 5 or 6 episodes now. So we'll do it again. So Stephanie and Jayme, what are you guys doing to make the world a better place?
We're taking people backpacking.
I love that answer.
Yeah.
Taking people outside and talking about life.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
That is the perfect 100% 5-star.
Yeah.
Right,
what could be better?
I love it.
Yeah. One thing we like to say is like, that it's kind of been passed down to us, is let the wilderness do the work. Really, like the wilderness will do the work. So we're grateful to just reconnect people in that way. Like we could tell the science, we could talk your ear off about the science all day, but like just go out and experience. And I think that's gonna save our planet and change the world by changing the people in it.
One person
Very
at a
good.
time.
Well, maybe next time we get together, we can talk a little bit more about the actual science and get into that a little more on a deep dive. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd love to have you back. And how's that puppy of yours? I should say old man. Stephanie.
He's good. He was just up here and now he's eating. Honestly, he's eating turds right now.
We're dog lovers, so
he
we
knows
always like
that
to
I
talk about
can't
people's
stop
dogs.
him right now. Huh?
Yeah. They do. They know. They manipulate you.
Does, I know. My neighbor just came up and dropped a package off, and Otis left with him, and pretended like he was gonna go with him, and now he's just eating the deer turds.
So I got to tell
But
you a
other
story.
than that, he's doing great.
We were babysitting her dog, Otis, and he's he kind of walks like an old man. He's just very slow going, and I opened the door in the back sliding wall of my old house in Battle Creek there, and that dog turned into the fastest sprinter I've ever seen and caught a squirrel in less than 3 seconds.
Wow.
And shook that thing like a rag down, threw it on the ground, and he was done with it. We were like, wow.
What kind of dog is this?
He's he's not that fast. Like that's probably one of the only thing he's caught. He's a German Shepherd Malamute who otherwise moves very slow.
It's all fake. He's got you faked out.
He does, man. You get him 10 feet from a squirrel.
Well, he's 13 now, so he can't.
Oh, he's lost a step by now, but
that's probably 5 years
but
ago.
he's still as mischievous as ever.
Oh, sounds like it.
Yeah.
He's a great dog.
Hey, it was great hanging with you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
And, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah.
Keep doing what you're doing, making the world a better place.
Yay. You too.
Have a good night, guys.
Yeah,
okay,
take
bye.
care. So if you just listen to this podcast and you appreciate the content and the work that we're doing, we would love your support. Look in the comment section of this episode, subscribe, rate us, comment. This gets our podcast in front of other listeners. And if you noticed, we don't have advertisers. For the cost of a cup of coffee, you can help keep it this way. Become a supporter right now. We'd appreciate it. I'm Jim the Yogi.
I'm Rick the Beach Man.
Peace.